I never wanted to believe that love could rot, that a relationship, something I once held so close, could decay slowly like a fruit left too long in the sun. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the empty space where Ryan should have been, I knew I had been lying to myself. The clock on my nightstand blinked 1:47 a.m. Ryan still wasn't home. I exhaled sharply, my fingers clenching the sheets. I had convinced myself for months that this was just a rough patch, that work had him exhausted, that maybe I was a problem for feeling so needy. But the truth sat in my stomach like a swallowed stone. He wasn't just working late. His phone, when he let out his sight, was always face down. Text notifications never lingered on the screen. The smell of cologne that wasn't his, or mine, clung to his shirts. And then there were the small things, the gradual shifts that cut deeper than any grand betrayal. The way his lips barely brushed mine in the morning, the weight of his body growing unfamiliar beside me in bed, the absence of his fingers reaching for mine when we walked together. I had loved Ryan for 3 years, but in the last 6 months, I had felt more alone than when I was single. A soft knock on my bedroom door pulled me from my thoughts. I knew it wasn't before he even spoke. "Still up?" His voice was low, cautious. I hesitated before answering. "Yeah." The door creaked open just enough for his face to slip through. Tousled dark hair, sharp blue eyes that always saw too much, and a mouth that curled into something between amusement and concern. He wasn't wearing a shirt, again, just loose sweatpants that hung dangerously low on his hips. Alex had always been like this, casual, effortless, unapologetic. He had moved in when our parents got married 6 years ago, and we had spent our late teens avoiding the implications of just how well we got along. Now, at 24, it was harder to ignore. "You good?" Alex asked, stepping inside. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. "Not really." He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms over his chest. "Ryan." I nodded. Alex didn't say, "I told you so," but I saw in the way his jaw tightened. He had never liked Ryan, said he was too polished, too charming in a way that felt rehearsed. "He's a bullshitter," Alex had once muttered after meeting him. "Guys like him only love themselves." Back then, I had laughed. Now, I wasn't sure Alex had been wrong. "He's still not home?" Alex asked. "Nope." Silence stretched between us. Alex shifted, exhaling through his nose before pushing off the wall. "Come on." I frowned. "Come on where?" "The kitchen. You need a drink." I almost argued, but sitting alone in bed, stewing in my thoughts, wasn't doing me any favors. I climbed out of bed, pulling on a hoodie, and followed him down the hall. The house was dark, moonlight pooling through the windows. Alex moved easily in the shadows, leading me to the kitchen and flicking on the dim stove light. He grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the counter, poured 2 glasses, and slid one toward me. I stared at it. "I don't even like whiskey." Alex smirked. "Drink anyway." I did. It burned on the way down, but the fire in my chest felt better than the emptiness that had been sitting there all night. Alex leaned on the counter, watching me. "So when are you going to admit it?" "Admit what?" "That he's cheating on you." I flinched. The words hit like a punch, not because they were new, but because I had been avoiding them. "I don't." "Don't bullshit me," Alex cut in. "You already know. You've known for a while, haven't you?" I swallowed hard. "There's no proof." Alex scoffed. "You don't need proof. You feel it, don't you? The way he looks through you, the way his touch has changed." The words sliced through me because they were true. I looked away, staring into my glass. Even if he is, what the hell am I supposed to do? Alex was quiet for a long time. Then, softly, "Leave him." It sounded so simple when he said it, like I could just walk away without 3 years of memories clinging to my skin. Alex reached for my glass, his fingers brushing mine as he took it from me. The touch was brief, barely a second, but my whole body locked up. It wasn't the first time. There had been moments before, glances that lingered too long, fleeting touches that sent heat curling through my stomach. The way his body had always felt like a magnet to mine. I had ignored them, convinced myself it was nothing. But tonight, in the dim light of the kitchen, with whiskey warming my blood and heartbreak sitting heavy in my chest. I felt it, undeniable, dangerous, real. I forced myself to look up at him. Alex was watching me, his blue eyes darker than usual, unreadable. I licked my lips, my throat dry. I should go to bed. Alex nodded slowly. Yeah. I turned to leave, but before I reached the doorway, he spoke again. If he doesn't see you, someone else will. I froze. The words unraveled something inside me. I didn't turn around. I just walked back to my room, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind replaying every moment of the night. I didn't sleep, and Ryan didn't come home. I didn't hear the front door open. No tired footsteps. No murmured apology. No explanation. By the time the sun bled soft light to my bedroom curtains, Ryan's side of bed was still cold. I should have been furious. I should have confronted him the second he walked through the door, if he even bothered to come home at all. Instead, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a ghost in my own life. When had I stopped fighting for us? A sharp knock at my door jolted me. Alex, get up, he said, already pushing the door open. His voice was firm but not unkind. He was still shirtless, still annoyingly unbothered, a coffee mug in one hand and a protein bar in the other. He tossed the bar onto my bed. I blinked at it. What's this? Breakfast. I don't want it. Eat it anyway. I sighed, sitting up and rubbing my face. What is this? Some kind of intervention? Alex smirked. You tell me. I wasn't in the mood for his smug attitude, but I also didn't have the energy to tell him to get lost. Instead, I peeled the wrapper off the protein bar, took a half-hearted bite, and swung my legs over the bed. Alex watched me, his blue eyes scanning my face like he was trying to gauge just how close I was to breaking. Ryan still not home? He asked. I shook my head. Alex exhaled through his nose. You gonna talk to him? I let out a humorless laugh. What's the point? His jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought he was going to say something biting, something sharp enough to cut through my apathy. Instead, he just nodded toward the hallway. Come on, let's get out of here for a bit. I frowned. Where? Anywhere. I hesitated. Leaving the house felt like admitting something was wrong, like acknowledging that I was running. But wasn't I already running? From the truth? From the inevitable? Alex didn't wait for my answer. He just turned and walked down the hall, expecting me to follow. And without thinking, I did. The air outside was crisp, the sky a dull shade of gray that threatened rain. Alex led me to his car, the familiar scent of leather and faint cologne wrapping around me as I slid into the passenger seat. We didn't talk much as he drove. I watched the city blur past a window, the hum of the engine a quiet comfort. It wasn't until we pulled up to an old diner on the outskirts of town that I finally spoke. Seriously? I asked, eyeing the faded neon sign that flickered above the entrance. This is your grand escape plan? Alex grinned, unbothered. Best coffee in town. I rolled my eyes but followed him inside. The diner was mostly empty, the scent of bacon and fresh coffee lingering in the air. We slid into a booth, and a waitress poured us 2 cups before disappearing into the back. Alex leaned back against the cracked leather seat, studying me over the rim of his mug. Say it, he said. I frowned. Say what? That you know it's over. I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around my cup. I don't. Yes, you do, Alex interrupted. His voice was softer now, but there was something firm beneath it. You wouldn't be sitting here with me if you didn't. I looked down, watching the steam curl from my coffee. I hated that he was right. I didn't know it was over. I had known for months, maybe longer. But knowing and accepting were 2 different things, and I wasn't ready to let go of the version of Ryan I had fallen in love with. Alex reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. The contact was brief, almost accidental, but my body reacted. I pulled away too quickly, my breath catching. Alex didn't move, didn't say anything. He just watched me, his expression unreadable. My skin was hot, too hot. This wasn't the first time I had felt it. The heat, the awareness, the sharp pull towards something I had no business wanting. It had always been there, buried beneath layers of denial and circumstance. But here, in the quiet intimacy of a nearly empty diner, it was impossible to ignore. Alex licked his lips, tilting his head slightly. "You feel it too, don't you?" I inhaled sharply. "Alex." He leaned in, just enough for the space between us to shrink, for his words to reach only me. "You can lie to yourself, but don't lie to me." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to look away, to focus on anything but him. The coffee, the window, the cracked Formica tabletop. This was wrong. But if it was so wrong, why did it feel like the only real thing I had left? Alex didn't push. He just sat back, tapping his fingers against his mug. "We should go," I said, my voice unsteady. Alex nodded, but there was something knowing in his gaze, like he had seen everything I was trying to hide, like he already knew how this story was going to end. The drive home was quiet, but the air between us was different, charged, heavy. By the time we pulled into the driveway, my heart was beating too fast. I needed space, air, distance. I climbed out of the car, my fingers twitching with restless energy, and made my way toward the front door. But before I could step inside, Alex grabbed my wrist. Not hard, not aggressive, just firm enough to stop me. I turned, my breath catching as I met his gaze. "If you want me to stop," he said quietly, "say it now." I opened my mouth. No sound came out. Alex exhaled, his fingers trailing down my wrist before releasing me. He didn't say anything else, just walked past me, heading toward his room. I stood there, rooted in place, every nerve in my body on edge. I should have gone inside, closed my door, pretended nothing had happened. But instead, I turned toward his room. And before I could stop myself, I stepped inside. I shouldn't have been here. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing us in together. Alex stood by his bed, watching me with quiet intensity that made my breath falter. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't ask why I had followed him, because he already knew. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering as I took a shaky step forward. "Alex." His name felt dangerous on my tongue, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to pull away or sink deeper. Alex tilted his head slightly, eyes dragging over me with something undeniable. He didn't reach for me, didn't push, he just waited like he was daring me to make the first move. And God help me, I wanted to. I wanted to stop thinking, to stop feeling like I was drowning in my own life, to stop aching for someone who had already let me go. My fists clenched at my sides, torn between guilt and the burning pull between us. This is a mistake. Alex's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smirk, but wasn't quite understanding either. "Then leave." I exhaled sharply, turning toward the door, my hand shaking. But I didn't open it, because leaving meant going back to an empty bed, to waiting for Ryan, to pretending. I had spent months ignoring the truth. Maybe it was time to stop. Slowly, I turned back. Alex's breath hitched, his control slipping just enough for me to see it. The tension in his jaw, the restraint in his stance, the heat in his eyes. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was him. Maybe it was me. All I knew was that 1 second there was space between us, and the next there wasn't. His hands were on my face, my fingers tangling in his hair, mouths crashing together in something raw and desperate. There was nothing gentle about it. No hesitation, no second-guessing, just heat and hunger and weeks of unspoken longing erupting all at once. A broken sound tore from my throat as Alex backed me against the wall, his body pressing into mine, making me feel something real for the first time in months. I shouldn't have wanted this, but I did. God, I did. Alex's lips left mine, dragging down my jaw, his breath hot against my skin. His hands roamed, bold, unapologetic, claiming, "This is wrong." I gasped. Alex stilled, his breath uneven. His fingers tightened on my waist before he pulled back just enough to meet my gaze. His eyes, asterisk, asterisk dark, intense, filled with something I didn't want to name, asterisk, asterisk locked onto mine. Does it feel wrong? I opened my mouth, closed it, because no, it didn't. It felt inevitable. My body betrayed me before my mind could catch up. My fingers curled around his wrist, holding him there, keeping him close. Alex exhaled sharply, almost like a curse, before his lips crashed into mine again. We weren't careful. We weren't slow. We weren't thinking. And maybe that was the point, because for the first time in too long, I wasn't consumed by Ryan, by his absence, his indifference, the slow death of what we used to be. For the first time, I felt wanted, needed, seen, and I didn't want to stop. Not when Alex pulled me toward the bed. Not when he hovered over me, his body heat seeping into mine. Not when his lips ghosted over my neck, making me shudder. But just as his hand slid under my shirt, a loud bang echoed from downstairs. We both froze. My heart slammed against my ribs as footsteps sounded in the hallway. Heavy, unhurried, familiar. Ryan. Panic ripped through me as I jolted upright, my breath coming fast and uneven. Alex was still for half a second, his expression unreadable. Then he moved, stepping back, dragging a hand through his hair like he needed to snap himself out of whatever spell we had been under. The front door shut. Keys hit the counter. A sigh. Ryan was home. My stomach twisted, guilt rushing in all at once. What the hell had I just done? Alex watched me, his jaw tight, his chest still rising and falling too fast. He didn't look guilty. He looked frustrated, like he hated that we had been interrupted, like this wasn't over. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stand. I should go. Alex didn't say anything. He just nodded once, his gaze burning into mine as I slipped past him, my body still buzzing with everything we had almost done. By the time I stepped into the hallway, Ryan was already walking toward the bedroom, his expression unreadable. "Hey," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "You're up?" I forced a smile, ignoring the way my lips still tingled. "Yeah." He leaned in, pressing a distracted kiss to my forehead before sighing. "Long night." I bet I almost said. Instead, I nodded. Ryan walked past me, heading for the shower, like nothing had changed, like we were still us. But we weren't. And now, I wasn't sure if we ever could be again. I barely slept, lying next to Ryan, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. I felt like a stranger in my own life. Hours ago, my body had been pressed against Alex's, my breath stolen by his touch, my mind consumed by the fire we had barely managed to put out. Now I was back in this bed, cold, distant, pretending. Ryan hadn't noticed. He had come home late, muttered something about work, taken a quick shower, and collapsed into bed without another word. No apology, no attempt at connection, no awareness of the storm raging inside me. I turned onto my side, staring at him in the dim light. This was what I had been holding on to. A man who had already let me go but refused to say it out loud. A relationship that had been over long before I had the courage to admit it. And Alex had been the reckoning I hadn't seen coming. I exhaled slowly, the weight of my choices pressing against my chest. I couldn't keep living like this, torn between a past that was slipping through my fingers and a temptation that was dangerously real. Something had to break. And deep down, I already knew what it was. Morning came too fast. Ryan was already up, moving through the kitchen like nothing had changed, like I hadn't almost cheated on him with his stepbrother. I sat at the table, barely touching my coffee as he scrolled through his phone, the glow of the screen reflecting in his tired eyes. "You working late again?" I asked, my voice too even. Ryan didn't look up. "Probably." I nodded, tracing the rim of my mug. "Where were you last night?" The question made him pause, just for a second. But that second was enough. Ryan glanced at me, forcing a small smile. "I told you, work ran late." Lies. I could hear it in his tone, see it in the way he shifted slightly, the same way he always did when he wasn't telling me the full truth. But what hit harder than the lie itself was how easy it was for him to say it, how effortlessly he pretended. I set my mug down carefully. "You don't love me anymore, do you?" The words weren't planned, but they fell between us like a loaded gun. Ryan blinked. "What?" I leaned forward, studying him the way I should have been doing for months. "You don't love me," I repeated, this time with quiet certainty. "And you haven't for a while." Ryan swallowed, his throat bobbing. "That's not true." I tilted my head. Then prove it. A flicker of something flashed in his eyes. Guilt, hesitation, maybe even regret. But not love. Not anymore. And for the first time, I wasn't scared to acknowledge it. A bitter laugh escaped me as I sat back. You can't. Ryan exhaled, running a hand over his face. I shook my head. You don't have to say anything. Because I understood now. Ryan and I were already over. We had just been too afraid to call it what it was. The realization was both devastating and liberating. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor. I think we need to stop this, I said quietly. Ryan stared at me, his face unreadable. You mean us? I nodded. Yeah. He exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. So that's it. I met his gaze, something calm settling in my chest for the first time in months. It was over a long time ago, Ryan. We just didn't want to admit it. Ryan didn't argue, didn't try to change my mind. He just sat there, silent. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. I didn't know where else to go. But my feet made the decision before my mind could catch up. By the time I knocked on Alex's door, my pulse was pounding. A few seconds passed. Then the door swung open. Alex stood there, shirtless, hair messy, eyes dark with something unreadable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, without a word, he stepped aside, letting me in. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing a new beginning. And this time, I didn't look back.